The Los Angeles sky, usually generous with its sunshine, was weeping under a rare, melancholy shroud that day. The drizzle that began in the early hours had, by late afternoon, surrendered to a downpour that seemed to wash away all the city's noise, transforming it into a soothing, hypnotic rhythm. The asphalt roads glistened like mirrors, the colors of neon signs bleeding and scattering across the wet ground. People scurried along the sidewalks, forming small, hasty islands under their umbrellas. Amidst this rush, Keanu Reeves walked at a calm, steady pace. A dark blue beanie pulled low shielded his face from the raindrops. The brown leather jacket he wore, elbows shined and shoulders slightly slumped, looked as though it had witnessed many journeys alongside him. That day, after a long shoot, his mind was weary, his spirit longing for a respite from the city's chaos. Perhaps he was simply seeking a quiet corner to wait out the rain. A moment away from the spotlight, expectations and familiar faces, where he could just be himself. His steps led him away from the crowded main street onto a narrow cobblestone lane. It felt like a forgotten corner of the city. Modern skyscrapers gave way to older apartment buildings adorned with climbing ivy and bay windows. It was then that he noticed it, a small shop tucked between the buildings. Echoes of time books. The display window was fogged over from the warm, dim light inside and the rain outside. But through the haze, he could see it was filled with books. The brass knocker on the wooden door was oxidized, and the hand-painted sign bearing the shop's name was elegant but faded. In the window sat a few yellowed books, an old pair of eyeglasses, and a dried rose stem. It was a place resisting the tide of time, whispering its own silent story. It felt like an irresistible invitation. On impulse, Keanu headed for the door. Instead of using the knocker, he touched the rough surface of the wood and pushed gently. The door creaked open softly. As he stepped inside, the clamor of the outside world instantly vanished. The first thing that hit him was a dense but not unpleasant smell, a unique blend of old paper, ink, perhaps a hint of lavender, and the unmistakable aroma of aged wood. The air was warm and dry, a stark contrast to the damp chill outside. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, the details of the space emerged. Narrow aisles were flanked by towering bookshelves reaching toward the ceiling, some leaning slightly, others packed tightly together, standing honorably under the weight of thousands of volumes. In the center stood a large old table piled high with books, and in a corner, illuminated by the soft glow of a lampshade, sat a worn velvet armchair. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic patter of rain against the windowpane, the steady tick-tock of an old wall clock, and his own breathing. Behind the counter sat an elderly woman, her silvery white hair gathered in an elegant bun, wearing a lavender-colored knit cardigan. Her eyes, behind wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, held a spark of intelligence and warmth. She looked up from the thick, leather-bound book she was reading and offered Keanu a smile. "Welcome," she said, her voice soft yet clear. "Escaping the storm, I imagine?" "Yes, something like that," Keanu replied, returning the smile. "This is a wonderful place." He took off his beanie, running a hand through his damp hair. "Thank you," the woman said. He learned her name was Helen, and she was the third-generation owner of the shop. It had been founded by her grandfather, and she had grown up amongst these shelves. "It's my home and my sanctuary," she added with a gentle sigh. "Though time can be a bit harsh, we try to hold on." She hadn't recognized him. To her, he was just a polite stranger seeking refuge on a rainy day, someone interested in books. Feeling welcomed by Helen's warmth, Keanu began to wander slowly through the aisles. It felt like a labyrinth, each turn promising a new discovery. His fingertips grazed the spines of old bindings, smooth leather, grainy cloth, cardboard covers worn by time. He pulled out a random book, an old edition of Jack Kerouac's On the Road. Flipping through the pages, he noticed underlined sentences, notes scribbled in the margins. He sensed these books hadn't just been read, they had been lived with. He lingered for a long while in the philosophy section, Plato, Nietzsche, Camus. Alongside the familiar names were works by thinkers he'd never heard of. In the poetry corner, he encountered Rilke's verses, pausing for a moment, lost in their depth. Then, unexpectedly, he stumbled upon a section dedicated to old science fiction and fantasy. Asimov's, Clark's, Le Guin. A smile touched his lips, sparked by a flicker of childhood excitement. In the very back, in a dusty section that seemed rarely visited, he found old maps, engravings, and technical drawing books. He looked with admiration at a few volumes containing detailed illustrations and mechanical explanations of classic motorcycles. Helen watched him from behind the counter, quietly observing. She was struck by the respect this man showed the books, how gently he handled them, how carefully he turned the pages. She hadn't had many customers lately, and most who did come were young people quickly searching for something specific. This man, however, seemed in no hurry, as if he were trying to connect with the soul of each book. She appreciated his quiet reverence, a quality she found increasingly rare in today's fast-paced world. When Keanu returned to the counter holding a photo album filled with black and white pictures of the city from decades past, their conversation resumed, this time delving deeper. They talked about the places in the photos, the buildings that were long gone, the way people dressed. Helen pointed to one photo in the album. It showed the shop in its earliest years. Her grandfather stood proudly behind the counter. "My father always used to say," Helen said, her voice tinged with nostalgia, "a bookstore doesn't just sell books. It preserves memories, dreams, and wisdom. This place is like a time capsule." Then, prompted by Keanu's gentle questions, she spoke more candidly about the challenges of keeping the shop alive. Rising rents, the relentless competition from large chain stores and online platforms, the changing reading habits of younger generations. Her voice didn't tremble as she spoke, but a weariness settled in her eyes. "Sometimes," she confessed in a near whisper, "I worry the books on these shelves will outlive me. If this shop closes, all these stories will fall silent." Keanu listened intently, offering small gestures of understanding, a nod, direct eye contact, occasionally drawing vague, subtle parallels to his own life. He thought about the ups and downs of his own career, the difficulty of preserving the spirit of a project, the search for something lasting and meaningful. Helen's story wasn't just about a shop owner's anxieties. It reflected the universal struggles of any passionate endeavor, the effort to protect a legacy, the resilience of an individual trying to adapt to a changing world. In that moment, he felt a connection form between them, something beyond words. After that first visit, Keanu left with only a few old postcards and a modestly priced book of Rilke's poetry, but the atmosphere of echoes of time books and Helen's sincerity stayed with him. A few days later, when the city awoke to a sunny morning, he found himself drawn back to that narrow street. This time, he came not just for refuge, but with the hope of perhaps making a small difference. Helen was surprised but visibly pleased to see him at the door. "Welcome back. It seems you brought the sunshine with you." Keanu smiled. "I just wanted to look around again." This time, however, his eyes weren't just on the books. He took a closer look at the shop's general condition. He heard the rattling sound from the fan of the old computer near the counter. He noticed a shelf near the entrance, tilting slightly to one side. "Helen," he began gently, "if you don't mind, could I take a look at that shelf? It seems like it could use a little support." Helen hesitated at first. "Oh dear, please don't trouble yourself. I'll get to it later." "It's no trouble at all," Keanu insisted. "I'm pretty handy with things like this." Trusting his sincerity, Helen showed him a small toolbox. Keanu placed his jacket on the armchair and rolled up his sleeves. With quiet concentration, he examined the shelf, selected the right screws, and quickly secured it. Then he turned his attention to the computer. Asking Helen a few questions to understand the problem, he performed some basic maintenance, making it run quieter and faster. He did all this so naturally and unassumingly, it was as if he had been a part of the shop for years. When he finished, Helen gratefully offered him a cup of freshly brewed chamomile tea. As they sipped from old, slightly chipped porcelain cups, they watched the dust motes dance in the sunlight streaming through the window. They didn't talk much, but a comfortable, peaceful silence settled between them. Before leaving, Keanu asked about the rare motorcycle repair manual he'd spotted on his first visit, along with a first edition of the Kerouac book and a few old photographic prints. When Helen brought them out, Keanu's eyes lit up. He examined them carefully. The bindings, the pages, the illustrations within. They discussed the book's history and value briefly. When they agreed on a price, Keanu pulled out his wallet. He chose to pay in cash rather than use a card. As he counted out the bills and handed them to Helen, their fingers brushed. In that brief moment, with the light hitting his profile just so, the veil of uncertainty lifted from Helen's mind. That face. It was the man from the movies. His name was on the tip of her tongue, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise, but she quickly composed herself. Keanu seemed to notice her brief hesitation, but gave no sign. Helen didn't ask. She simply thanked him and accepted the money. Perhaps she was mistaken, or perhaps it didn't matter who he was. What mattered was the presence and kindness of this gentle man. He had even insisted on paying a little extra, claiming the condition of the books was better than expected. As Keanu gathered his books and thanked her again before leaving, Helen stood at the door and watched him walk away. Now she was certain. It was Keanu Reeves. But why was he here? Why had he helped her? And why hadn't he revealed his identity? As these questions swirled in her mind, a wave of gratitude and warmth washed over her heart. That evening back home, Keanu took a photo of one of the books he'd bought, the first edition Kerouac. He placed it on his old wooden table next to a steaming cup of tea and an old mug similar to the one Helen had served him. The lighting was dim, the atmosphere peaceful. He shared the photo on his personal social media account, one he rarely used, and that was known only to a few close friends and some dedicated fan groups. He added a simple caption, "Found a treasure in the heart of the city. Places with souls still exist, and a great cup of tea. No location tag, no shop name, no hashtags. Just a feeling, a fleeting share." But in the age of the internet, even the smallest ripple from someone like Keanu Reeves could create waves. His followers, noticing the rarity and personal nature of the post, were intrigued. Fans and book enthusiasts immediately went into detective mode. They analyzed the clues, the rarity of the book, the pattern on the teacup, the wood grain of the table in the photo's background. Knowing Keanu lived in Los Angeles, they began researching independent bookstores in the area. Theories sprouted on forums and blogs. Where could Keanu's bookstore be? Became a quiet little game. Eventually, a few persistent individuals connected the dots and found echoes of time books. The first visitors confirmed that the shop's atmosphere perfectly matched Keanu's photo. They asked Helen subtle questions, trying to gauge if Keanu had indeed been there. Helen remained discreet, but the increased foot traffic didn't escape her notice. The posts from these initial visitors amplified the effect. A local arts and culture blog picked up the story, bringing it to a wider audience. The article, titled "The Time Capsule Keanu Reeves Escaped to: Echoes of Time Books," focused less on the celebrity sighting and more on the magic of the shop itself, Helen's dedication, and the importance of such vanishing spaces in the modern era. The piece unexpectedly went viral. In the weeks that followed, the old creaking door of Echoes of Time Books opened and closed more frequently than it had in years. The visitors weren't just Keanu fans. They were book lovers who had read the blog post. Locals curious about this hidden gem in their city. People simply yearning for the smell of old books. The shop filled with a diverse crowd, young and old, students and collectors. But there was no chaos. Instead, there was a gentle buzz of people respectful of the space, speaking in hushed tones, getting lost among the shelves. Helen was astonished but deeply moved. Although slightly overwhelmed at first, seeing the wonder and admiration in people's eyes energized her. She chatted with newcomers, recommended books, shared stories about the shop. It felt as though the bookstore had awakened from a long slumber. Books changed hands more often. The old bell above the door jingled more frequently. For the first time in years, Helen found herself thinking not just about paying the bills, but about ordering missing volumes by her favorite authors, perhaps even getting the faded sign restored. To cope with the increased activity, she hired a young university student from the neighborhood to help out part-time. One afternoon, a young art student approached Helen, holding up her phone to show Keanu's social media post. "Excuse me," she asked hesitantly, "was this picture taken here? I mean, does Keanu Reeves come here?" Helen looked at the photo on the screen. The teacup, so similar to her own, the familiar wood grain of the table. and the book held by that kind man's hand. There was no longer any doubt. She smiled, a mixture of amusement and profound gratitude in her eyes. "Sometimes," she replied simply, a touch of mystery in her voice, "sometimes special souls find their way here." The student had to be content with that answer. But in that moment, Helen fully grasped the magnitude of the impact her quiet visitor had made. Months passed. The seasons changed, painting Los Angeles with the golden hues of autumn. Echoes of Time books had become one of the city's known, yet still special places. The initial intense buzz had subsided, but a loyal customer base had formed. The shop was moving towards the future on steadier feet without losing its soul. One late afternoon, as the sun began to set, Keanu Reeves happened to be walking down that same street again. Not in a car this time, just walking, perhaps out of simple curiosity. The shop lights were on. He glanced through the window. A few people were inside. A couple browsed the shelves, a young man chatting with Helen at the counter. The young woman Helen had hired was organizing books nearby. The atmosphere was calm, warm, and inviting. The evening sun, striking the shop window, cast a golden glow on the books within. Keanu didn't go inside. He just stood on the sidewalk for a few moments observing the scene. A faint smile played on his lips. Seeing that a small, quiet action, a cup of tea, a mended shelf, a shared photo, could make a tangible difference filled him with a sense of peace. That had never been his intention, perhaps, but seeing the outcome was gratifying. Just then, Helen looked up and saw the familiar silhouette standing outside the door. Time seemed to stop. Their eyes met across the distance and through the glass. No words were exchanged, but a profound understanding passed between them. Helen's eyes conveyed gratitude, comprehension, and a warm thank you. Keanu's eyes reflected respect, good wishes, and quiet satisfaction. He offered not a Hollywood smile, but a simple, sincere nod. Helen responded in kind, a gentle smile warming her face, radiating from the depths of her heart. Then Keanu turned and walked away, melting back into the anonymity of the city as quietly as he had appeared. He continued on his path, to his films, his projects, his silent acts of kindness. But behind him, on that small Los Angeles street, he left a bookstore that was breathing again, continuing to whisper its stories. Though touched by Keanu Reeves's presence, Echoes of Time books never became a mere celebrity spot. Helen successfully preserved its soul. Visitors still felt the scent of the books, the texture of time, and the quiet invitation of knowledge. Helen didn't tell everyone the story of the kind stranger, but she kept the silent melody of his visit alive, in the shop's walls, among the shelves, between the pages of the books. This story shows that fame isn't just about glitter. Sometimes the greatest impact lies hidden in the quietest moments, the most modest gestures. It reminds us that true legacy isn't measured in bank accounts or awards, but in the small, positive touches we bring to others' lives. Keanu Reeves, once again, off camera, simply as a human being, proved how powerful the language of kindness and empathy is, far beyond words, and Echoes of Time books would endure, like a monument resisting time, echoing that silent language. Sometimes it's a cup of tea, sometimes a listening ear, sometimes just being there. Kindness can appear in the most unexpected moments, in the simplest forms. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story of Keanu Reeves and Echoes of Time books, please click the like button, subscribe to our channel for more stories like this, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, we can all be a silent melody in someone else's life. See you in the next story.